remember everybody from last time, but in case this is your first lesson, I'll just introduce myself. So, I'm Brandon. I'm from Palo Alto High School, which is in Palo Alto, California. I'm a rising senior, and I've had like pretty decent amount of experience in computer science. I've taken the computer science AP course at my high school. Also done some app development. So yeah, and I'm just like glad to teach you all. Um, yeah. Would like any other team members like to introduce themselves as well?
I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Ejin, and I'm from Fremont, California. Currently a rising senior in commission science in high school. So yeah, I took a computer science course last year as well. And also I will be your teachers for the third and fifth class, like for now. And yeah, I guess that's my intro.
Oh yeah, and regarding the teachers, another team member just probably due to some complication couldn't make it today, so I'll be teaching everyone again. So I hope you guys enjoy your last time and we can have a fun time together again. So yeah. Um so let me share my screen first. First of all, does any of the students want to introduce themselves? Like just like what school you're from, like your name or yeah, no. Okay then, we'll just start then. Um, okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay. Okay, so last week we did sort of like a intro to like object-oriented programming, and today I want to start off by giving like a small recap. So, object-oriented programming is a type of programming that's based on the concept of classes and objects. And um, when we instantiate a class, which is basically like the process of like creating an object, we create a new object. And inside a class, you'll usually find different attributes and methods. So a small example I also used last time was like a car. So um, a car would be like a generalization of all like specific cars you can have. So the car would be the class, and when you create an object, the object would be type of car because it falls under like the class. So one car would be like a Tesla, right? And I like to compare an object to like a noun because then you can describe the noun using adjectives and verbs. So the adjectives would be compared to like attributes. So when you're describing like a Tesla, like you can describe like how fast it's moving, how heavy it is, and what color it is. So those are like the adjectives, right? And then you also have the verbs, which are also known as methods. So here you can basically tell a car to like slow down by how much, or like speed up by how much, or like turn a certain amount of degrees, and that's how you like describe your like object using verbs. Is there any questions on that? And feel free to speak out because I can't really see the chat. So like if you have any questions, just like unmute and ask a question or something. Yeah. Okay, then I'll move on. So here's an example in Java. So let's say you have like a class called bank account, and then you have the attributes down below, and this is how you like define an attribute in Java. So the attribute is called account name. So that's basically like an adjective, right? You want to describe like what is the bank account called? Like I don't know, like my bank account or something, right? And you have these other like keywords in front of them, and we'll go over them later. But this is like how you declare an attribute in Java. And the second one you have is balance. So balance would just be like like describing like basically how much money you have in your bank account right now. And then you have the methods down below. So one like verb you can have the bank account perform is like, or like not your bank account, but like one verb you can like use to describe the bank account is like by depositing money. So here is like basically the structure. If you guys remember, like when you declare a method, you have braces, curly braces after the declaration. So basically, like any code that goes inside the braces will be part of the method, and the method will execute that. And you also have another method called withdraw, which is basically when you want to take out money from a bank account, and it basically follows the same syntax. Okay. So now I want to get to something that we didn't really cover last class. Like wanted to cover it, but we kind of ran out of time. So in a Java program, you're also gonna see like a part of the program like on top where there's gonna be like a bunch of like import statements. This is when like you want when the programmer imports classes. So these classes can be either predefined or like they're built in from the Java directory, like libraries, or they're user defined, which is when the programmer themselves creates the classes. And like I said before, like they're generally declared at the beginning of the program. So like in the line 1, 2, 3, or just like the first few lines, you're gonna see where a programmer imports their classes. So an example would be like import java.util.arraylist. And if you guys were here last lesson, you know we did like a lesson on math operators. So the math class is actually part of java.lang, and they're actually imported by default. So this just tells you that like some classes, you don't actually need to import them. They're already like recognized by like the basic memory of the environment. So this goes to another thing we can talk about. It's Java packages. And packages are basically a way that you can group related types, like classes. Like you can group a related classes, and the grouping provides access protection and namespace management. So I know this is kind of complicated, but just remember it as like if you have like similar classes, they can generally be grouped into one package. And these packages can be either predefined by the Java library, or they can also be created by the programmer themselves. And some examples are actually just java.lang and java.util. So in like the previous slide, when we import something, when we import java.util.arraylist, ArrayList is actually a class part of the java.util package. And that's basically like the basic syntax of how you import an ArrayList class. So when you import something, you always state the package first, and then you follow up by what classes inside the package you want to import. Are there any questions on that? So I know you haven't seen it like in the code yet, but this is just basically like some terms you should know and like what it will look like in the actual code. Let me just stop sharing to see if there's any questions in the chat. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any, so. Okay. So now let's talk about like more things that appear in your code. So one of them is modifiers. So like in this previous method called like called public double deposit, the first word public is actually an access modifier. So I'll explain what it is. So when you put like public in front of like an attribute or like a method, it means that the class, like the attribute or method in the class, can be accessible by any other class. So it kind of just defines itself like public to all other places inside the program. And when you have private, it means that like when you put a private method or a private attribute in a class, you can only access that attribute or method inside that inside that class. So other classes you create cannot access that private variable or method. And then you got more complicated things like protected, which is like when the code is semi-public and it's only accessible to other classes within the same package or subclasses. So it's just generally like a lot of layers, but two most like you'll see most are like public and private. Protected and like a no modifier or like a default are less used, but it's just important to know still. So this is protected, and you have finally a no modifier. It's like when you don't place anything, no access modifier. The class can be accessible by any other class in the same package. So remember we talked about packages here. So if you have like a very like similar related class inside the same package and you don't have any modifiers, you can access anything inside the class you created. And some additional terms are like final and static. So basically when you put final inside a declaration, it means the value cannot be changed. So it's just basically like final, like you can't change it at all. And then you also have this term called static. So static means that an object is universal among all instances. So this pretty much means that like a static attribute or a static method, you don't really need like an object to access it. You can kind of just run it by itself because it belongs to the class. It doesn't belong to a certain object, because like previously when we described like let's say like turning or like accelerating, it kind of like belonged to the Tesla car rather than like the car class, because yeah. So in this case, when you declare a method as static, you don't actually need to create an object for it to run. Okay, then let's move on. So now let's move on to basic Java data types. This is like the second thing you'll see when you declare a method or an attribute. So remember here we had public double deposit. So the public is an access modifier, and then the double is a data type. So double is actually a kind of primitive type. And underneath this primitive type category, you'll see a bunch. You'll see like Boolean. So Boolean is basically used for like true and false. So let's just say like you want to evaluate something as true or false, and you can put that like in front of an attribute or a method. Like these are just types. And you also have like bytes. This is char is short for characters, char is short for characters, and you also have short. You have int, which is short for integers. You have long, you have float, and double. So the main ones you should like be focusing on are like Boolean, int, and double. These are like the main ones we'll be using. And you also have another kind of data type called reference types. So reference types are pretty much like all other classes and objects. And these classes can be like defined by the Java library itself, the JDK. And these kind of types would be called string, which is like just any like combination of letters, pretty much like a word. Like anything you type as a word or you know as a word would be like classified as a string in Java. And you also have like array lists, which is something we'll be learning later. And you also have like user-defined classes. So any like classes you like the programmer creates, you can also create like types out of that class itself. So these two things, the modifiers and the Java data types, are pretty much just like what you will see at the beginning of an attribute or at the beginning of a method. Those are the two things you'll be seeing. So now let's move on to the specifics. And so yeah, so this is basically a summary of what I just said. So attributes are also known as instance variables or fields in Java. And the basic syntax is you start with an access modifier, like public or private, and then you're following by a type with which is like a string, an integer, a double, and you have a variable name. So the variable name you can basically just like whatever the method or attribute is like describing, just call it whatever you want. And an example would be like an attribute called private string name. So you're basically saying this string can only be accessible by its own class. It's of type string, and the name pretty much means whatever object you're creating, this is the name you're going to give to it. Are there any questions on this or no? And of course, like you want to follow, this is a whole statement, and remember, like when we finish a statement, we finish it with a semicolon. So always remember that as well. Okay, so let's move on to the methods part. So like before, the basic syntax would be you start with an access modifier, give it a return type, and end it with a method name. And you're also going to have arguments for methods. So like an argument, let's say like you want to accelerate a car, right? So what exactly are you accelerating? Well, of course you're accelerating the speed, right? So an argument would be like a parameter for the method. Like what do you need for the method to like function? Well, in the case of a car accelerating, you're going to need to know how much it'll increase in speed. So an example here is you have public void. The void return type pretty much means the method doesn't return anything. And you have the method name accelerate. And the parameter here is double increase. Double is the variable type, and increase is the variable name. And you're pretty much saying that when you call this method, when you call like object dot accelerate, whatever number you put in here will basically mean how much your object will accelerate by, or like how much it increased in speed. And basically you see this comment like additional code. This additional code will basically mean like this, like where you write your write the code to explain how the object increases in speed. So yeah. And some more in-depth information about the void, like a return type would be like an integer or a double, right? In the method scenario, you can also have a void as a return type. So if you have like a double or an integer, you would have to return a double or an integer as the method output. But if you put a void here, it means that the method doesn't have to return anything. And it's perfectly fine in this case because when you're accelerating, you're just kind of telling like trying to like reset the value of the speed of the car to reset to another higher value. So you don't exactly have to return that value yet, if you get what I mean. Okay. So now we're going to come to two important types of methods, and these methods help you access fields. So fields, if you remember, are also attributes, but fields are basically what they're called in Java. And how to access them is use get methods. So when you write a get method, your purpose is to get the value of the field. So let's say your field is like, I don't know, like the speed of your car, and then your method name would be called get speed. So then you can like return the value. So in this case, you'll have like the exact same syntax. You'll have like a public method. You'll have a return type as double because you want to return a value. So it has to have not a void return type. And you're going to call the method name. You're going to start with a get, and then you're going to follow it by the field name. So if your field name is speed, your method name is going to be called get speed. And basically you're going to return that speed to like get the value of the speed. And set methods work similarly, but like in a different way. So it's basically the same syntax. So, but instead, it's not going to return anything because instead of like trying to get a value, you want to set a value. So you're not really returning anything. So in this case, the return type of set methods would be a void, and the method name would be set field name. So if you have like a car speed that's like, I don't know, 45 miles per hour, and you want to access that speed and set it to a different value, you would call the object, you would and then you would say like dot set speed to like, I don't know, 60 miles per hour. And that's how you like change the value of the field. So now we'll talk about constructors. So since we've talked about like methods and attributes, these are like what make up the object and how you describe it. So how do we create the object now? So we create the object using something called a constructor. So a constructor initializes an object when it is created and gives like initial values to the fields. So actually like a default constructor like automatically exists. So if you don't write any code in your program, a constructor is already like automatically generated to help you create the object. And here's how it would look if you were to like write it again. So the basic syntax would be you would have an access modifier, and it would be the name of the constructor would also be the name of the class, and you also have some parameters. So it's sort of like an in-between of a method and like an attribute in that way, because you don't necessarily return anything. So here you have an example. So if your class is called car, your constructor would be called public car. The parameter, because you want to like initialize like the model of the car, so you want to like give a parameter of string model, and you have additional code to help with that process, which I'll be explaining later. So we use this to create an object. So to create an object, we first declare an object with a type and name. So the type will be the class type, because you want to create an object under that class name. And we want to instantiate the object, which is basically like creating the object, using the new keyword. So the syntax for this would be class name, because it's of that type of class, object name, which basically you can create by yourself, equals new, and then you have a constructor part. So you have the class name, object name, equals new, and then the last part is the constructor. The constructor would be class name again, because you called it the class name, and then you have whatever arguments. So using the constructor from before, we'd have car, which is the class name, Tesla, which is the object name, equals new, and car, and a string inside the parameters, because in the constructor, we define the car to have a parameter of string model. So when we actually when we create the object, we have to put something in the parentheses, and in quotations, that's just basically short for like string. It's basically the syntax for a string. You put quotations Tesla, and the Tesla basically is the model. And another example would be like a Nissan. So a car Nissan is equal to a new car Nissan. So you see, like the new car part doesn't actually mean they're like the same thing. It just means that they're a new object created from the class car. So any car you would create would have the same exact syntax, except you would replace the object name with like whatever you want to call it, and the inside the parentheses it would have a different like name or model, right? So for this one it would be like Tesla, and for this one it'd be Nissan. If you have like a Toyota, it'd be the same thing. So yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, then let's move on. So now I kind of want to do like a demo. So does everyone have Eclipse downloaded? And just like, I don't know, type something in the chat, because I can't. I kind of want this to be like a hands-on activity, so if you guys could like open Eclipse if you have it, then that'd be great. Or does anyone not have Eclipse? Can you just like type something or like say it out loud, like if you don't have Eclipse? Okay, so if you don't have it, that's fine. I'll just screen share it, and if you do, just follow what I'm about to do. And by the way, if you don't have it, there should be an email sent to you that has like a download link, and just basically follow the instructions from that link, and you'll be able to get it. So, yeah. Let me just, yeah, so here's the demo. Like, here's basically like the basic structure of what we're gonna do. So we're gonna create a bank account, and here is basically what the code is going to be. I'll probably do something a bit more simple first for everyone to understand, but here's basically like how a bank account would function. Like, you'll see some attributes at the start. You're gonna see a constructor, and you're gonna see some methods afterwards. If you can identify that by yourself, I'll give like everyone like a minute or two to like see what's exactly in here and if you recognize what it is or not. Okay, I'm gonna be sharing the Eclipse screen. Does everyone see this? Okay then. So for those of you that don't have any experience or haven't like didn't come last week, I'll just give everyone like a brief run through of what's going on. So, okay, I have a bunch of projects here. You guys probably have like nothing, but to like create a project, you want to click the package explorer, go to new, and then go to Java project, and then here's how to create a new project. You want to click this. Project name, I don't know, just say like second lesson practice. Like, it doesn't really have to be anything. It doesn't really affect anything. And you can just like finish this so we get a new project folder. So inside the project folder, I want everyone to click the arrow and then right click SRC, which is short for source. Right click this, and to create a class, you want to go to new and then class, and this basically creates a class. And because we're creating a bank account, let's just call the class like bank account because it's like a generalization of all bank accounts, and we can just call it object whatever, like my own bank account or something. So here, bank account. And also check this main method because we're also going to be running the program through this. So yeah, and we'll finish. And in case you guys don't know what the main method is, I explained it last class. The main method is pretty much like, it's different from all methods because it's not like really like, because it has a static keyword, so it's not really like bound to an object, it's like bound to the class itself. And why you need this main method, you need it because if you don't have it, the program won't run. And if your program won't run, then you won't get anything. So yeah, So always remember to have this in one of your classes so you can run your code at the very end when you write everything down. So yeah. And here we have the basic structure of what we're going to do. So inside our class, we're going to want to first declare some like attributes of our bank account. So I guess the first thing you want to do is like probably give it like a name. So attributes should generally be private because they should only be like accessible by the class you're in, like the class is declared inside. So you have private, you have the data type, which is a string, and you have account name. And this is obviously a statement, so you want to end it with a semicolon. And another attribute we want to give the bank account is its starting balance. So I forgot to explain about like the data type double. So double is like another data type for expressing numbers. So this is more for complex numbers like decimals. So for integers, you can only type like integers. And for double, you can type things like, I don't know, 7.56 or something like that. And those kind of numbers would fall under the double category. So, and in money, we obviously want it to be double because we're not going to have whole numbers of balance, right? So, yeah. So these are our two attributes. One of them gives our bank account a name, and one of them gives our bank account a starting balance, basically. Now, we want to create someone just entered. Okay, so now we want to create a constructor for the bank account. So in the future, we can create an object using this constructor. So like I said before, we want it to be public because we want this constructor to be accessed. Because generally, like when you have a big program, you're going to have a lot of classes, and you generally want the constructor itself to be accessible by other classes. But in this case, we're only going to have one class, but it's still better, like a general like tip to have your constructor as public for this scenario. Public, and then our constructor is going to take the name of our class. So, did I actually name this thing back account? Okay. This might be a problem. Okay, let me just create something new. I actually type back account. Bank account. Okay. Let's just get rid of this. Okay. I'm gonna just repeat everything. Oh yeah, and when you're naming a variable, you generally, if it's like more than one phrase, you generally want the first word to be lowercase and all other words that follow it to be uppercase. That's just like the general naming convention. So this basically looks like the same thing. So now we have the constructor. So this is our constructor, and this is how it's going to look like. So this is what a default constructor would look like. You wouldn't have to type this out, but this is what the default constructor would look like. Everything would be like initialized to like 0, and if you're not going to write anything in it, then you don't have to define it. But we're going to do something with this. So remember when I said like the constructor initializes your like starting, like your object, right? So if you have the attributes account name and balance, you can first, using this constructor, initialize these variables. So here we can first say this is a keyword that points to the balance name. This dot balance would equal pretty much whatever. Like if you say 0, and you probably wouldn't have to define it, but if you want to say like 50, then you're saying that your account starts with like $50. So yeah, so this would be probably like your most basic constructor. And now we're gonna get to some methods. So remember the methods I introduced like previously, like deposit and withdraw? We're gonna write those methods here. So you're gonna have a public method because in reality you want this to be accessible by other classes. Public, you want to give a return type of double, and you want to call the method name deposit. So remember I also said like there are parameters. So what exactly are we depositing? We are depositing money, and money is like probably should be a double data type. So this is how your declaration should look. So notice there's an error right now. There's an error because if our method is not a void type, we have to return something, and we haven't done that yet. So we have to write additional code to return that. So does anyone know what we should do here to like help us deposit money? Like, how do we use this variable here to deposit money? Remember our like basic operators last time? What do we do when we deposit money into our bank account? Do we like multiply, or do we like divide, subtract? You can shout it out if you want, but okay, no. We do addition. So inside here, we're gonna say this, the balance, because we want to deposit money into our balance. And this is how you like set a variable to a new value. You say balance is equal to balance again. So you're just basically resetting this balance variable to take a new value. I need to do balance plus money. And this is a Java statement, so you end it with a semicolon. And notice how we still have an error, we haven't returned anything. So at the end, we want to just say return balance, and the error disappears. So what this method does is when you call a method using an object, the object, which has a balance, will deposit this amount of money, and it'll generate a new balance. Does that make sense? You took the original balance, you added money, and you turned it into a new balance that has a new value, and you return that new value. And we can do the same with withdraw. So we can create another method called withdraw with the same parameter money, because you're taking money out as opposed to adding it. And does anybody know what this will look like? Like what should go in here? Like literally one thing should change. You can just gotta get some interaction in this class, right? Come on. You can just shout out the answer. Let me check if there's anything in the chat. Okay, there's nothing. Well, okay, I'll tell everybody then. Well, the plus sign becomes a minus sign because you're taking out money. So the same code is here. Balance is equal to balance minus money, and you want to return the new value of the balance. So these are your two methods. You have account name balance, you set the starting balance to 50, and you have two methods, one that helps you take out money and one that helps you add money. So what can we do with this? Well, now we got to create the object. So how do we create the object? So does anybody remember? So we start with the class name, which will be the type of our object. And we have the object name, which I'll just call my bank account or something. It can be anything. It's just an object name we create. We have the equals, and then we have the new constructor. So constructor, not that, okay. The name of the constructor. The constructor is called bank account because the constructor also takes the name of the class. So we write the constructor in here. Bank account. And this is how you create an object. So now we want this object to, or this object is our own bank account, right? We want this bank account to deposit or withdraw money. So we can do my bank account. And when you want to call a method, you want to go object dot. The dot is basically how you call a method. You do my bank account is the object. You call the method using dot, and let's say you want to like deposit money. And now you can replace the money parameter with a number or like a double data type, and like just say like 100.75 is the amount of money you want to deposit. And you end the statement using a semicolon. Now the only problem is, how do we get this balance? So there's actually a method we can use to get the value of this. Does anybody remember how we can access the value of fields? I literally just said it, like get the value. Okay, it's called a get method, and we just learned about. So under this constructor, let's create a new method called public double. And remember how I said the name of it should be get and the variable name. It's just, you don't have to follow this exactly, but it's just like a general naming convention. You guys should follow it. It's just easier to recognize and like kind of just like pair up with the attribute you're trying to get the value of. And then this would be a method followed by the two braces. And what do we have to return here to get the value of this? We just return this because we're just returning the value. So now if we do my account dot get balance, follow this, this statement will pretty much print out what we deposited and it'll add it to the original. So first of all, let me do this. My account dot get balance, let me paste it here. And in order to print this to the console, we have to do something called system.out.println. You remember this? So this command basically prints whatever is in here to the console. There's an error here, but that should be fine. So what should this line print to the console? Like, remember what we have in this constructor. we set the original balance to 50. So what should this line of code print out? Let me just run it. Yeah, it should print out 50. And it's 50.0 because it's a double, because the double requires like a decimal. And now we'll see what happens when we print this line out. If you know your basic math, you should be able to get this question right. So what would this line print out now? Does anyone just want to like say the answer? Because I don't know if anyone's typing in chat. I can't see it because I'm screen sharing, but you should get 150.75. Yeah, so it shows in the console 150.75. So first, when we created the object, we start with 50. And when we first print out the value, we get 50. Then when we deposit, we add 100.75 to 50. And when we get the value again, and we print it, we get 150.75. So this is basically how like you access, like you create the object and you access all the stuff you wrote above inside the main method, which then runs your whole program, and you can get like outputs like this. So I hope everyone was able to follow that, and maybe you can like recreate this on your own. Like probably some of you already did this. I can't really like see what you guys have done, but yeah. So, and another thing is I didn't really use this account name. So here you can actually like use this account name. So instead of just only having the balance in the constructor, you can have a parameter called string account name. So now in the constructor, you can set this. So I didn't really describe this that clearly. So when you're using this, you're basically pointing to this variable here. And when I say this.account name, this.account name is not this, but it's this. Like this basically points to the field. You gotta remember that. So this keyword points to this. So when I say this.account name, I want it to be equal to the parameter I set here. So this part is this, and I want that to be equal to this, which is this parameter here. So what this does is whatever account name I put in here will also be equal to this account name here. So that's how you like give the object a name at the start. So you're gonna see an error here because now I have to put something in this parameter. And now I can call something like, I don't know, piggy bank, right? This will be the name of my account. And how do we get this name? Does anybody know how we can get the value of this name? It's the same thing. Get. Okay, does no one just want to say anything this entire class? Like, okay, so we'll use another get method. So here we define another get method that has the return type of a string. We call this get account name. This is the naming convention. Capitalize the A and N, lowercase g. And we'll return the account name. So now we can print out the name of our account. So now print line, the object call the method getAccountName. And now you should have piggy bank here. So does anybody have any questions? And if you guys, actually, I might teach this next time, but here's a basic thing you can also do. Like, remember how we had like system.out.println like hello world from last lesson? We can actually like, so if we print this here, something will be hello world will like be printed on top. And notice how like when I use print line, everything prints in a line. This is just like reviewing last lesson, but yeah. So instead of writing hello world, we can actually write something here. So we can write something like the name of my bank account is, and this is a process called concatenation. So if you want to combine two strings together, you want to combine them using the plus sign. So let's just take this out. So can anybody guess what this will print? Just this line? Well, you don't really. Okay, I'll just run it. So yeah, the name of my bank account is piggy bank. So this is like just another technique that I'll probably like go over like sometime, or someone will, one of your teachers will go over next class or like future lessons. But if you want to combine strings together, you use the plus sign. So this is one string, and this is one string. This is a string because when you do, this is your object, you call the method getAccountName, and when you call this method, it returns this. And what do you know? This thing is a string. So this is why this whole thing has a string data type. And when you combine these two, and you can only combine strings with strings and like other data types with other data types. Like you can't do like this plus like 7. Like you can't combine like a string with an integer in this code. So when you combine two strings, they work, and this is the output. So let me stop sharing. So there's some more advanced stuff in this code. You're gonna see something like if logic. Like if you see in the bottom method public boolean withdraw, it's something more complicated. And it's more complicated because in this scenario, we're always assuming that we're withdrawing less money than we have currently. So if we have like $50 and we withdraw like, or let's say we have like 50, right? And we withdraw like 25, well, we're gonna have 25. But if we have like $50 and we can't withdraw 75, right? It's because that'd be a negative number, and we can't have negative money, right? So this method is more advanced to ensure that we can't withdraw something that's bigger than our actual amount. So everything's like the same here. You see, you have public deposit is basically like the same thing, but here instead of like a double, you have a boolean, and this pretty much makes it so that if this, like the amount of balance is greater than the amount of money we currently have, or like the amount of money we currently have is greater than the amount of money we want to withdraw, then we perform the action. But if the amount of money we have is less than the money we're going to withdraw, then we return 0, which pretty much means that we don't really, like, we're going to have 0 money left. Like the operation failed, like we can't withdraw really. So, and then this final part is like return true. We're going to like talk about this next lesson. We're going to talk about like if-else statements, else if, more like loops, like for loops, while loops. So get ready for that. But I hope everyone can digest the information we learned about today. I'll just share my Eclipse screen once again. So I want everyone to learn about like defining your attributes, like at the very top. Like first of all, defining your attributes and knowing what knowing what attributes your object's gonna have. Knowing that your constructor will help you first initialize variables. So you initialize the starting balance to $50, and you initialize your starting account name, which will then be called here as piggy bank. And then knowing how to use get methods, which is fairly simple actually. You use the get methods to just get the value of these two attributes. That's the sole reason we use get methods. And then you have these two methods, which are a bit more advanced. They require some like math, but it's still very simple, but it's just a tad bit more complex. But basically these will help you deposit and withdraw money from your bank account. And finally, you have your main method, which will run everything. So does anybody have any questions about today's lesson? Oh, I just saw someone type, I just accidentally deleted everything at 6:43. I'm so sorry. I can't see the chat, so um yeah. So there's gonna be a recording of today's lesson, so um if you don't like or if you don't like get everything today, you can like watch the recording again and just try and like replicate what I've done. So yeah, no worries. And yeah, so for those who haven't downloaded Eclipse, there should be an email that gives the download link. So make sure to download that as fast as possible, because like the most important part of today's lesson was like writing the code. Like most like what I've talked about like at the start was just like basic knowledge, but it's very hard to understand unless you actually do the coding itself. So yeah, make sure to come to the next lesson prepared, and we're gonna be writing code again. So yeah. So it's 7:01. If everybody doesn't have any questions, I guess you're free to leave. Thank you, and goodbye.